What's up, DA? How are you?
I'm good. What do you think about the proposal?
I like it. I'm in the minority on that one.
Okay, tell me.
Look, and I'll tell you why. I think the preseason's a joke. I really do. I think it's become so outdated and unnecessary, and you charge fans top dollar for that garbage. And so I think that needs to go down to 2 games. And you add one game in the regular season to make it 17, and then you add the extra playoff team, and it gives more credence to being the top seed. I mean, you get the top seed, and you're the team with the bye, and that puts more value on that. And the reality is the 7th seed isn't going, maybe once in a blue moon, is going to win the entire thing and get to the Super Bowl. And so I think I like more games. I like more games that matter. And I hate the preseason, so it works for me.
You have been pushing back against the narrative that Joe Burrow has leverage in this situation and doesn't have to play for the Cincinnati Bengals. Why do you think the Bengals hold the cards here?
Well, he doesn't have to play, but he's going to have to sit out. And nowadays, you sit out, you leave a lot of money on the table, and there's only so many earning years in a body. I mean, here's the thing. People keep talking about Elway. Elway had baseball. People forget that. He had leverage because he had baseball. Eli Manning didn't want to play with the Chargers, but the Chargers had a grade that was very comparable on Phillip Rivers, and they got extra pieces out of it. So they're different scenarios if people want to keep pushing back on that. The kid, he hasn't said that. He's hinted at things, and he's never come out and say, I'd love to play for the Bengals, so that's why it's out there. But what are your options? To sit out the entire season and go back into the draft? Well, if you go back into the draft, you're going to get drafted behind Trevor Lawrence. That much we know. So now you're not the number 1 pick. And a year ago, he would have been begging to be the number 1 overall pick. It makes no sense to me. Go compete, go there, become a star, make the Bengals into a power, and then look around and say, see what I did to the Cincinnati Bengals? What's wrong with that? And what's wrong with being that kind of quarterback? That's what's missing for me. When I hear all this talk.
Well, I don't think anything's wrong with that, but is that realistic? I mean, we spoke to Carson Palmer on Radio Row, and he said, I thought the same thing. I thought I could change things in Cincinnati, and I couldn't. You can't change things. They're a losing organization.
Well, they actually have more playoff appearances in the last decade than the Dallas Cowboys.
It's fair.
So Dallas puts all this money into their organization, and Jerry has bells and whistles and the greatest practice facility in the world, and there's been more playoff games played by the Cincinnati Bengals, or at least more playoff appearances by the Cincinnati Bengals than the Dallas Cowboys.
But you know that they're not going the extra mile to spend money to win
a championship. Well, here's what they don't do. They don't have an indoor practice facility, which most teams do. And, in fact, nowadays they almost all have them, and you have to have it. That's a negative on the Bengals. But their scouting department isn't as big as others. I get it. But you know what? Whatever they're doing in the scouting circles, and you can judge a draft 4 years ago. Let's go 4 years ago. In 2016, they drafted William Jackson, pretty good corner in the first round. They drafted Tyler Boyd in the second round, pretty good wide receiver. They drafted Nick Vigil in the third round. He's going to get action on the free agency market. And Andrew Billings is the fourth-round pick. So they've been doing some things right in terms of their drafting. So do you need all those scouts? And look, I get it. I know they don't spend in-house on a lot of things like some teams do. But when Zach Taylor took the job, he redid the entire building in terms of coaching offices and everything, and they spent money to do that. So I just don't think that the perception is right. Is it do they spend like certain teams? Absolutely not. They don't. They're a small market team. I understand that, but to say that they're not trying to win is ridiculous.
Pete Prisco joins us here on the show. So I don't want this to be a fight because I really want to find some middle ground with you because I think you make some good points. But I do have to push back against this idea that Mike Brown is doing what it takes to win. They draft really well. But I don't think there's anybody inside that organization that would be honest, that would say that they trust the owner, that he cares about winning a Super Bowl. Would you?
I mean, he's the son of Paul Brown. What gives you the idea that he doesn't want to win?
Come on, Pete. I mean, Paul Brown was great, but
spend money.
But Mike Brown has never, ever been aggressive in terms of wanting to build a champion.
Well, how do you build a champion, DA?
Well, you have to draft well, which he has.
Draft and develop.
Although, as you said, the scouting department is the smallest in the NFL. Every coach that has ever been through those doors, I'm sure you speak to guys, the same guys that I speak to, have said that there's kind of an overwhelming complacency with the owner. He's never going to spend money in free agency. And if he does have a good team, he's never going to say, let's go the extra mile to try to win a Super Bowl. I mean, he was fine with Marvin Lewis losing wild card rounds every single year.
He was going to the playoffs he went to the playoffs 5 straight years, too. There are a lot of teams that would do cartwheels to do that.
Yeah, but there's a lot of teams that if you didn't win a playoff game in 20 years would say, we got to get this guy out.
Well, I mean, one of those playoff games also, Carson Palmer took a shot to the knee, and they would have won that play. They were the better team. They would have won that playoff.
It was
game.
15 years ago.
I mean, there are a lot of circumstances at play here. I get it. They haven't won a playoff game. But to sit there and say that they haven't been a winning organization in the last 10 years is misguided. They have the same number of wins in the last 10 years as the Chargers do. And people would say, wow, really? Yeah, well, they do. They both have 77.
Okay, but I think we would both agree that the reputation for players around the NFL would say both the Bengals and the Chargers don't go the extra mile to win a Super Bowl.
What's going the extra mile? Give me an example.
Well, spending money.
Extra mile. If you draft to develop, you're going to win, period.
But spending money, I mean, you don't have to spend a ton of money, but you and I both know that the Chargers and the Bengals consistently don't pay players.
They don't go out and spend money in free agency?
Nor keep their own, core around if they don't have to.
Well, they kept Andy Dalton. They kept Carson Palmer, both. They both got long-term contract extensions.
Well,
drafted them, developed them, kept them.
Carson Palmer eventually said, get me out of here, and he went to the Raiders and then the Cardinals. I mean, they didn't really necessarily want to lock him up long-term for market
you hear
rate.
Chad Johnson talk about Cincinnati. You listen to him talk about the Bengals. He raves about the city. He raves about playing there. He raves about the organization.
Okay, well, I mean,
there's the other side. The guy who's catching passes from Carson Palmer.
I think you and I would agree that Ocho Cinco raving about the quote-unquote organization is the lone voice there, that most Bengals players do not say that the organization is a great organization to play for.
Cincinnati, Miami, nobody. Look,
I'm not saying it's not a great place to live. No, I'm talking about the organization.
Would you rather live in Miami?
No, it's not. It's not fair to criticize the city of Cincinnati. That's not what I'm doing here, because it's not like Green Bay is some unbelievable metropolis. I mean, you can win a lot of places that aren't huge markets. This is not a knock on Cincinnati, the city. I'm just saying, I'm sure you've spoken to the same people that I have, that former players, coaches, all scouts all say, yeah, I mean, you go to the Bengals, you can't change that. Mike Brown is Mike Brown.
But give me the examples of where they're not at least trying to compete.
Well, they have the smallest scouting department, as you said, in the NFL. They do not invest in their practice facility.
And they've drafted well despite having.
They absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But they don't have the practice facility, and they don't spend money in free agency.
The practice facility, I'll give you that, because I think teams should have their own practice facility and not practice in the stadium. I'm a big believer in that. The Jacksonville Jaguars also practice in their own stadium as well. They don't have a practice bubble, and that's a concern. And from what I've been told, and I don't know if this is true, they tried to build one and they're too close to the bridge or something. I don't know, but in terms of cap commitment, I mean they spend close to the cap. I mean they're middle of the pack. I think they are in terms of the league. And so that's, no different than a lot of teams. They're right there with a lot of the middling teams. So, look, spending and going and buy free agents doesn't necessarily mean you're not trying to win if you don't do that. The good teams usually draft, develop, and build their rosters through that type of process, and then you keep your own. That's the way to build a franchise. And if Joe Burrow goes there and he's who they think he is, then they're going to win. It's that simple. You will win. And once you win, then things start happening. Look at Seattle. Look what happened to Seattle. Seattle's organization was flat. And then it became, oh, my God, look at Seattle, because they won. And they consistently won. If you consistently win in the NFL, fans will come. Other things will come from that. You will be able to develop around your team. You will get more money. You'll get more local sponsorships. You're never going to compete with the Cowboys because they're the Cowboys in terms of local revenue streams. But you'll be able to do a lot of things that you can not do right now, which is maybe build that practice facility somewhere.
Pete Prisco joins us this morning here on the show, senior NFL columnist, CBSSports.com, analyst for CBS Sports HQ. My final question will be, so you expect then Joe Burrow to be the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals week 1 this year?
If he's not, he's a moron. I'll put that out there, okay? Because here you were a year ago. Who were you? You would have been begging to be the number 1 overall pick. Now you're the number 1 overall pick. Go bask in it. Go tell everybody out there, I'm Joe Burrow. I'm going into Cincinnati, and whatever perception is out there, I'm going to change it.
Okay, but forget your value judgment on it. Do you think he'll do it?
Oh, absolutely. He's playing. Nobody is that dumb to sit out nowadays when you have an opportunity to go make that kind of money.
But you don't think he could force a trade like the Bengals, like the Chargers and the Giants did? You don't think he'll try to force a trade to a different team for that pick?
No. If they want him, he's going to play there, or he's not playing. And is he going to sit out the year? Good luck with that. If he goes back into the draft, does he get picked before Trevor Lawrence next year?
Probably not, no.
There you go. So he wouldn't be the number 1 overall pick. Whatever. I mean, I just don't understand why. Okay, if he goes back into the draft, he could end up in he could end up in Jacksonville. And
well,
I know how
I've lived in Jacksonville
for 30 years.
But if Joe Burrow says, I'm not playing for the Bengals, you guys have to trade this pick, and the Bengals can get 3 number 1s, then he can force his hand.
If they got 3 number 1s for the pick, they might trade it anyway.
Of course. So that's what I'm saying. If Joe Burrow's dad goes, you know what, we're not playing for you guys. You guys got to trade this, and the Bengals can get multiple 1s for it. I mean, they certainly could and would do that.
If they could get multiple 1s for it, whether he play for them or not, they'd take that, DA. I mean, somebody came to the Bengals right now and said, hey, I'll give you my number 1 pick. I have 2 this year, and I'll give you 2 this year and 1 next year.
So
and
then why are we fighting this? Wouldn't you say the Dolphins could do that tomorrow, offer them 2 number 1s for Joe Burrow's pick?
2 number 1s this year and a number 1 next year, they'd take that. I'm sure they would take that.
And so
not because he doesn't want to play there, but because his value is there.
And so if there's a combination of Joe Burrow being tepid about playing in Cincinnati and the Dolphins or some other team says, we'll give you our 1 this year and our 1 next year, and the Bengals take it because they go, well, we don't want to deal with a guy that doesn't want to be here, and we get 2 number 1s, that's a totally feasible outcome here.
But it has nothing to do with the fact that him not wanting to play
yes,
there.
It does,
it
because
if the
Bengals,
the fact you give me the right value.
If the Bengals sensed that also, hey, the guy doesn't want to be here, then you take that deal quicker.
No, you don't, because you're stubborn. He has no other options. If you're sitting there and some team came to you right now and said, "I'll give you 3 1s," whether he wanted to play, whether he was in a parade in the middle of Cincinnati, you'd probably take that.
Okay. Pete Prisco, read him at CBSSports.com. Follow him on Twitter as well, at Prisco CBS.
Yeah, you're better than following the masses, by the way. You're better than that.
Hey, Pete, I'm not better than anything. I'm telling you what I think about a situation, and I'm telling you that Carson Palmer sits on this set and goes, I thought I could change it, and I couldn't. And if I advised him, I'd say you can't change it either. I'm saying Joe Burrow's getting that from a lot of places, not just Carson Palmer. That's why he sounded tepid about going to Cincinnati. If I'm the Bengals, that's part of my equation here. You're saying, screw it, doesn't matter, draft them anyway. I'm saying it has to be part of the equation.
I say draft him, and if he doesn't like it, so be it. And if you're gonna, what are you gonna do? Sit out? Go ahead and sit out. Go back into the draft and watch Trevor Lawrence get picked ahead of you.
Yeah,
and then you might end up in another place that's even people perceive to be even worse. And where's the worst spot than Cincinnati? People would say Jacksonville. And right? I mean, that's what they would say.
Well, I mean, you could argue Shad Khan's a more aggressive owner than Mike Brown, though. They've been in the AFC Championship game within the last 3 years. The Bengals haven't won a playoff game since I was 7 years old.
I can tell you this with 100% certainty. The fans of Jacksonville would take 5 playoff years over that one aberration season in a minute.
Okay, but the Jacksonville Jaguars fan has had, 3 AFC Championship games in the time the Bengals have not won a playoff game?
Correct, but, you're talking about 25 years ago, too. Well, I get it.
Yeah,
I understand that.
That means it's a long time since the Bengals have won a playoff game.
Well, the Bengals haven't won a playoff game in a long time, but but to say they haven't been winning in the past decade is not true. That is not true.
Pete Prisco, read him at CBSSports.com. Thank you, Pete.
All right, guys. Take care.
See you, buddy.